At eRoad, we believe fleet management doesn't have to be problematic. It should be effortless, connected, and future-ready for your heavy-duty operation. With a reliable, accurate technology solution, you can elevate your fleet's performance, improve productivity across your business, monitor events as they happen, and reduce costs and downtime. Get on the road to better fleet management and safer, more productive operations. Go beyond the basics and visit eroad.com today.
Welcome to Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wasson, trucking expert here at FreightWaves. And for today, we're going to be talking a little bit about insurance. Now, everyone talks about premiums. We're actually going to talk about what an insurance rating agency is and why that rating is so important for the industry. You can think about things like carrier ratings, but you also want to make sure that your insurance is rated very well. And we're going to have 4 guests with us today. We're going to be bringing on J.W. Taylor. He's the managing partner at Taylor Nelson PL. We're going to have Tyler Christensen, vice president of underwriting at TIE. And then we have Sandy Scardina. She's the senior vice president of strategic relationships at TIE. And then we're bringing on the folks at Demotech. It's Barry Kostler, CFA, is the chief ratings officer at Demotech. And so we're going to dive right in here just to start things off. We're going to kick it over to Barry. For folks who are not very familiar, tell us a little bit about what insurance rating agencies are.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. An insurance rating agency is just a company that reviews insurance companies' financial stability and their ability to meet its financial obligations. So these agencies might use data like capital and surplus, profitability, investment portfolio results and stability, risk diversification, and then vulnerability to changes in markets or natural disasters and that kind of stuff. There are currently 10 rating agencies recognized by the SEC as nationally recognized statistical rating organizations, or NRSROs. Demotech is one of those. The main players in the insurance space are Demotech and AM Best, but S&P, Moody's, and Fitch do rate some insurance carriers as well.
And I think that's really important. I remember hearing about Moody's and other ratings when we're talking about the quality of outside of the insurance field, but I had no idea that actually insurance also had similar ratings requirements. Let's toss it to JW here, because I think this is important for brokers and shippers. How does the rating agency, and what does this rating mean in terms of when I'm trying to determine what insure and what I need to look for?
So I think the question that you're asking me is, hey, are rating agencies important to shippers and brokers? And Thomas, this is the question that I wanted to raise in the industry, as to whether rating agencies really have any impact on shippers and brokers in the sense of what they are looking at. If you take a big step back, generally why potentially a rating agency is important is because shippers and brokers want their claims paid, right? That's what insurance does. And so for all these many, many years in the industry, the rating agency and the contracts mention only one. And so I raised the question is, hey, are there other options out there, and what does that mean? Not here to endorse any agency or program or anything like that, but just understanding, is it having an impact on the number of motor carriers that are available to shippers and brokers? Pretty important stuff, right, Thomas? Having the motor carriers out there actually performing. And so that's why the question was raised. And Thomas, I got to say that, the little bit of informal investigation that I've done is most of the shippers, most of the brokers that I represent or deal with don't know what Barry just told us, really don't understand what a rating agency is. I've asked the question live in front of insurance audiences, go, hey, do you know what a rating agency is and why? And 99% of the time, they really don't. They really don't know what it is. So I'm very excited, Thomas, that this industry question is being asked and that we're looking for answers and how to articulate to the industry what their options are.
And I think it kind of blows my mind as well because I've talked to insurers, and this is probably the first time I've had a conversation about a rating agency on an insurer. And it's not really something most of the time. I'm more worried about how much money am I paying when I have conversations. I'm kind of curious about what that means. Tyler, talking about how, how are new programs and additional capacity, how is this creating more options, especially when we're talking about like carriers and rated by agencies like Demotech. So let's dive into that.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, it all comes down to increased capacity. These brokers and shippers, they need truckers to move the goods, and we need the goods moved as the primary end result consumer. And so at the end of the day, as new markets are ultimately building up, phasing into the new market, as others are phasing out. And those may be Demotech rated carriers, but they're ultimately coming in to fill the void and, increase competitive pricing, offer more tailored solutions. And so to JW's point, most of them just know one, but the reality is this is an evolving issue and it is coming up because there's a lot of it. It's very advantageous right now. I mean, particularly in the fact that certain regions of the industry are pulling out for trucking. There's limited market access. And so it allows us and those that offer Demotech rated programs to come in and fill that void and ultimately give better options, with better pricing. And comes down to competition. I mean, everything's about competition and the ability there is in the market space. The better the markets can drive down their pricing because not everything's concentrated with one carrier. So I think we're going to begin seeing this more and more than we have in the past in different avenues. Historically, Demotech rated carriers were not admitted, but we're starting to see admitted Demotech rated carriers coming live, which better protects the end consumer, helps the trucker. It's highly regulated. So it's coming to existence, which is great. But the reality is it's just going to be phasing in much more probably in the next 5 years.
And we'll toss it to Sandy here as well, talking about the role of a private rating agency like Demotech, especially in this current environment. I know one of the challenges is depending on whatever the market, you got to make sure carriers are legit. You got to make sure there's a source of truth and that who you're working with is indeed who you're working with. Talk a little bit about how Demotech comes into it, and especially in this current environment. How can Demotech kind of become the topic of conversation for folks to change their outlook and say, hey, I want to have an additional layer of security and validation or have that rating?
Well, I think, just to echo a little bit about what Tyler just said, I mean, the trucking industry is navigating a blend of challenges and opportunities as it approaches December. Freight demand remains stable. The market continues to contend with, overcapacity due to the influx of new carriers during the pandemic boom. This overcapacity has led to low rates, pushing some carriers out of business. So the conversation is out there. However, the carriers that are still in business and remain stable, diesel prices are leveling off and spot rates are gradually, rising, but the insurance costs remain to be one of the largest expenses for truckers. And we're seeing more, trucking insurance companies either exiting the marketplace on an admitted companies and excess and surplus lines companies. And really, if they're not exiting, they're raising premiums significantly. And this imbalance of the supply and demand is driving the rate increases, and fewer admitted carriers and E&S carriers are available. So to address these challenges, what we're doing is we're offering an admitted product, Cimarron paper. It's Demotech rated. It's a liability product. And we believe this will increase capacity, that will give the truckers more choices and deliver another competitive offering out there where we can compete and provide solutions.
And I want to get JW's thoughts as well on this because how I'm trying to understand this. If I'm Demotech rated, it can open more doors for better rates. That means I've gone through the process. Or are we talking about this is a product in and of itself? I'll ask Sandy first just for more clarification here. Is that where I can get a specific liability product as in a rated insurance? Or is that where I as the carrier can get evaluated by Demotech and then it's like, hey, I'm more legit. I'm in a better pot in terms of insurance. I'm more trustworthy, and I can get a better deal.
No, I mean, if I understand your question there, I think we're providing an AL product, we're providing that admitted, and the difference is this is an admitted product. It's on Demotech paper, but what we're trying to accomplish is to educate the marketplace between Demotech and AM Best, because a lot of folks don't understand what the Demotech paper is and how the insurance company goes through the same rigorous rating process as an AM Best insurance company that rates the insurance company. So that's really what we're trying to provide, an education platform here on, the differences. Really not a lot of difference between AM Best and Demotech. And we're bringing this new product out to create more capacity to drive more solutions out there, because right now there's not a lot of solutions.
Okay, that clears up a lot of it. We'll toss it over to JW here, because I think, especially in regards to AM Best was mentioned as one of the ones that does the rating, but now, having more attentions from rating, Demotech entering the space. Tell me, what are your thoughts on that? What are the assumptions? Because that should be a big deal, having two ratings as well. It gives you more visibility and more trust compared to just one.
Well, Thomas, if I can get right to the heart of what the issue may be in the industry, is where a shipper or broker, and not a lot of them, a shipper or broker says, hey, listen, motor carrier, I can't sign you up because you don't have AM Best rating. But wait a minute, I do have a rating, and maybe it's Demotech. I have a rating, and Demotech, keep in mind, is a nationally recognized statistic rating organization. Okay, and so is AM Best, so are some others. So they, by the SEC, and so they're looked at. And then the question becomes, and here's the fun part, Thomas, when I call up and say, hey, listen, you've said no to my motor carrier because your contract requires AM Best. Why does it only say AM Best? I don't know. That's just the way it's always been. And so I have to check this box. And I say, fine. It's important to make sure the insurance that you're accepting from motor carrier is valid insurance, as Thomas, you pointed out a minute ago. But do you know why you're rejecting? No, not really. I really don't know why. Well, let's talk to your supervisor. No, don't know why either. Well, will you consider resetting based on this private agency's rating? Sure. Now, if we could open up back, I think, to Tyler's point, what we want to do is create competition, deal with rates, create more capacity. All those things are good for the industry, and ultimately for who? Me and you, the consumer, right? That's what we're trying to do here. And Thomas, my only point was simply this. It's tough for motor carriers. We'll throw out the word that you don't want to talk about anymore, nuclear verdicts, all those types of things, driving insurance premiums up without, we need more options, don't we, in the insurance world? Why say no to a private agency's rating like Demotech when you really don't have a reason to? I'm asking that question, and no one's been able to tell me why. And again, ultimately, the broker and the shipper want to make sure the motor carrier's insurance does what? Pays claims and are properly policed. And those, again, are things that I think if we research and look at and continue this conversation, Thomas, that you pointed out, first time you've heard this conversation, isn't it? If we have this conversation, we put a lot of smart people together and figure out what's best for the industry. And I think that's the question we have today.
And I think that blows my mind. I've never, even working with contracts, if I'm a motor carrier and I didn't know, and I didn't have a Demotech or an AM Best rated insurance, and nobody told me this, and now I just won this award, I'm getting declined for the award because it turns out my insurance was never rated, and they think that this person's not going to pay a claim. That's kind of the whole gist of it.
Yeah, and in fact, the motor carrier's auto liability policy for $1 million is from a AM Best or a Demotech, and that is good paper. And as Sandy pointed out, it's admitted paper. That's really important. And so if that's all true, Thomas, and we get to that point in the vetting process, Why would you say no to a motor carrier? I've only found one reason so far, and that is this, because that's how we've always done it. And that can't be the answer anymore. Going forward, we need a better answer than that. And how do we get there? By having this conversation. Thomas, it's an important conversation we're having today.
Well, this is probably one of the most important conversations. 80% of surface transportation, I think, moves for trucks, and losing any kind of capacity due to either the lack of the right kind of insurance, not understanding the value of ratings in your insurance. I mean, that can sink or swim your entire carrier and livelihood. And let's get Barry's thoughts on this as well here, because how do we make sure that we're ensuring that the insurance carriers, you're seeking the right coverage, whether it is Demotech, whether it's an AM Best or otherwise? How do you make sure that they're trustworthy and they're actually gonna pay out? Because this opens a new can of worms for me. I'd be worried that I get an insurance product and then it turns out I need to make sure it's rated, and then if I pick the wrong one, they may not pay, and I could be up the creek.
Yeah, a couple of things there, Thomas. First off, I'd like to say, Demotech's been doing ratings for 40 years, nearly 40 years. And so it's not our first time, doing this. We have a methodology that we filed with the SEC. They make sure we follow that. It includes review of quarterly and annual financial statements. We ask questions if we see something that's unusual. We follow up with the companies. We rate about 450 companies right now. About half of those are rated uniquely by us. And again, when we see places either in regulation or in contracts where it asks for a particular rating from a particular rating agency, we try to step in and say, hey, why don't you consider utilizing other rating agencies like JW mentioned, because it is limiting. And I would also mention that our ratings are based on our opinion as to whether or not a company will remain solvent and be able to pay claims. So the definitions for our ratings actually speak to how certain a particular rating level is that company will remain solvent. Some of the other rating agencies just assign a word to a rating like excellent or great or whatever, and doesn't specifically tie to whether or not they'll be around to pay claims. We think that's ultimately what people care about. So we want to make sure that we're looking at solvency and their ability to pay claims. It's not about whether the company's a good investment. It doesn't really have to do with how they treat policyholders or how they'll settle claims. It's will they be around to pay claims, and then if they do, it kind of depends on the situation. But so that's what we focus on. We publish those ratings on our website. They're free for anybody to look at, and we're around to answer questions and educate people as to how we come up with those ratings and how we monitor them. I'd say that in addition to that, the people that are relying on ratings might want to look further into, what kind of limits are on the insurance, how they want to structure their other requirements for insurance placed on business, whether it's, limits of liability or other coverages or what they want to see. But the rating of the carrier is a one facet of that.
And I mean, I think this is it reminds me of the Moody's ratings on bonds. And I think the thing is insurance, it reminds me, we just took it for granted and not thinking of whether the insurance company is rated and actually doing their due diligence and will actually have the money to pay out or will pay out. Tyler, I feel this may be an important and emerging issue because JD, you mentioned earlier as well, nuclear verdicts, carrier rates are going up. Is there the potential that if driver carriers and shippers and brokers are not paying attention to the ratings, that in the next few years, because of the rise in this trend, that some people may not actually get the insurance they need, or their insurer goes belly up and can't pay out and fulfill their obligations?
Yeah. I mean, certainly. I mean, there's a lot of new entrants, and the reality is, I mean, that's why we are standing behind this and wanting to advocate as much as possible for Demotech, because the reality is we have got to shift the perception. Demotech rated carriers are imperative right now. They're coming in at a time where there's niche portions of the market that are in significant need for new capacity. And it's not just commercial auto. It's, Florida with the catastrophic events that happen in Florida, all the fires and the realities of the homeowners carriers pulling out of California. There's new Demotech entrants that are outside of the trucking industry. And while we're talking about brokers and shippers today, the reality is there's others that we have to influence in this space. lenders, regulators, reinsurers. At the end of the day, we're trying to get ahead of this because in the long term, it is going to drastically impact the brokers and shippers when, to JW's point, their contracts say X, and that carrier, this trucker that's been hauling for them for years, just decided to get new insurance this year, and it happens to be rated by somebody that's not AM Best rated, and a partnership that has been in place for many, many years is dissolved over one clause within a contract that is essentially irrelevant. So we're just trying to do our job to socialize this because it absolutely is an emerging issue, and not just in our space. And the more we can socialize it, the better it's going to be for the entire insurance industry as a whole.
And we've got a little bit of time left. I wanted to check in with Barry again on this. What are for folks who are trying to understand, one, I need to see if my insurance is rated. What are the ratings? Is it kind of like a AAA, AA, B? What are the ratings that folks need to think about in terms of is there a good number to have, or is there a good rating? Because now we're opening the door to that second order, which is I need to know about this. What's kind of a good score?
Yeah, our ratings have several levels. What we consider stable is A or above. It's A, then A prime, then A double prime is our highest. We have ratings below A, but those typically aren't utilized as much because they're not considered stable ratings, but they're S, M, and L for licensed. And each one of those has kind of our estimate as to what percentage of those companies assigned that rating will survive to be able to pay claims. And what we've done over the years is we've done a bunch of analysis, a bunch of studies looking at average impairment and survival rates of companies we rate at different levels, and then compared those to AM Best ratings. And our ratings compare very favorably to those. Obviously, they have more rating levels, so we had to do some adjustments to kind of group ratings together. But we have studies that show that the survivability of our stable companies are a little bit better than ratings that they consider secure. And kind of that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of, do the ratings work? Are they effective? And so that's how we kind of gauge whether or not we're doing a good job in analyzing companies and assigning ratings to different categories.
And follow on before I ask JW here as well, this kind of asks a bigger question. Does the state of the health for these carriers, especially carriers for insurance that impacts brokers and shippers, is this a trend that is, are they getting better at being safer? Are their ratings moving up, or is there a growing trend because of these external forces like nuclear verdicts that the health of the overall marketplace is maybe deteriorating, and we need to have that rating data to know who's the ones that are going to be the healthiest?
A lot of times it's localized to an industry or a geographic region, because obviously things are so much different, but both on the regulations by state and then the individual dynamics of a marketplace. So we tend to see kind of localized rating trends. And we also see, like, within a market, let's say you're in a very difficult market where nuclear verdicts are tough and the regulations aren't exactly in the insurance carrier's favor, we still see companies that perform well despite that. So even within a difficult market, you'll see, some carriers separate themselves by being able to kind of manage those difficult situations better than others. So, yeah, I mean, it is pretty individual in terms of the ratings and whether or not someone can handle the environment they're in. The other thing I would say is, in general, we look at the macro forces of the marketplace they operate in, but it's really up to the individual company and their results that we rate. So, you can be a great company in a tough market, or you can be a not so great company in an easy or favorable market. It just depends on how you operate and how you execute your business plan.
And I think that's the biggest question moving forward is we're going to have more attention on those operators and their business plans. JW, final thoughts here. We've got about 3 minutes left. Looking ahead, so we've introduced the fact that it's very important. It's probably, especially with all the verdicts and everything coming up, that we need to understand the ratings. What are kind of the next steps or in your conversations? What would you recommend folks have for takeaway?
Yeah, well, I'll speak to the shippers and brokers first. Now's a good time to look at your broker motor carrier agreement, your shipper motor carrier agreement, and really understand what those say. I could tell you there's provisions in those contracts that are way more important than who the rating agency is. But it's a good time to visit that, because what happens in catastrophic claims that I deal with daily is those contracts, or lack thereof, can be a real problem. And I'd say to motor carriers, looking back to your contracts with your customers. Let's take a look at those, make sure they're actually reflecting your operations, what's going on. And motor carriers, let's look at your structure to best protect against these nuclear verdicts and those types of things. Summing up to say that, hey, listen, let's make sure we're triggering the insurance coverage. Let's make sure we're structured in a way that properly triggers the insurance coverage and best protects you from these out of control verdicts.
Definitely. Thank you all so much for your time. If folks want to learn more, we'll start with Barry. If folks want to get in touch, check out Demotech and get more information, what's the best way to find out?
Definitely our website, demotech.com. But I can be reached at bkessler@demotech.com. We'd happy to talk to anybody about any of these issues. One last thing I'd like to add, Thomas, is, kind of going off what Tyler said, with new entrants into the marketplace and kind of new niche players, Demotech's always been about seeking creative solutions and kind of honoring smaller or startup entities. So we don't have a seasoning requirements, so you can be a new entity. We don't have size requirements, so you can be a smaller entity. In case of smaller entities, where they're likely heavily reliant on reinsurance, so we focus on that. But we're not biased on only looking at the big guys or the national guys. So we can definitely help in markets where there's dislocation or issues with maybe the national carriers pulling out or changing their rates. We exist to help those companies in markets where they kind of need to be creative solutions.
Thank you so much. And Sandy, if folks want to learn more at Ty, what's the best way to get in contact and learn more? Then I'll toss it to JW.
You can go to our website, tyexperts.com, or you can reach out to me directly. My email is scardina@tiexperts.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. JW, last but not least, folks will get in touch with you and your company. Best way to find out.
Please do visit my website. There's lots of good editorial and information on that website, the news section, that specifically to transportation and logistics at taylorlawpl.com. taylorlawpl.com.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for coming on. Amazing conversation, huge implications. So folks are just joining us. This thing will be on demand, Apple, YouTube, and Spotify, wherever you can find your podcasts under Loaded and Rolling. We also have a newsletter, which is freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling. It goes out every Thursday at 2 p.m. That's a wrap for this episode, but join us next week. A lot more great content coming up.